So remember that a paradox are two things that seemingly don't go together, even though they're both true. Uh, the first one is one of the discouraging things of entrepreneurship, and that is people are not a reliable indicator of whether your opportunity is valid, particularly people writ large. And the reason for that is sometimes the person you're talking to is not in the target market, therefore they can't see the opportunity because they don't understand the market. It could be literally that people don't know that they're going to love what you offer until they actually have a chance to get out there and try it. There are so many things that fit into this. For example, nobody was clamoring for Facebook before Facebook was made. But once they'd seen what Facebook and MySpace and the other social sharing sites could allow, then they wanted it. So the mere fact that people say this isn't a good idea doesn't mean that they're right. That's why personally I never say to someone, I think that's a bad idea. I'll say, here are the concerns I have about it, but I'm very cautious to say that's just nuts because it's very hard to tell, to be honest. The next two paradoxes are really important. And this is this idea, out of this segment where I've gotten this information is very oriented towards the high growth entrepreneurship issues. So one is, yes, you typically are going to lose money before you make money. Not always true, frankly, particularly not in small businesses because they don't have a lot of financial depth, but it can be true, and you cannot be afraid of losing money while you're getting things right. Certainly Amazon's a great example of that. They lost money for a lot of years, and even today are not making much money because they're growing their business for the future. And the second is, don't get greedy. I see this problem in the people I work with, getting them ready to present to the angel group. They are very uncomfortable at the return the angel investors are going to get. And they think, why do I have to give that much away? And so because of that, they don't want to do what needs to be done to get investors or keep people involved because they're trying to hold everything to themselves. And the cliche is they end up owning 100% of nothing because it never gets off the ground. So this idea of, although you can certainly give away too much, the idea of being generous is sometimes necessary to get your idea off the ground. The next several bullets I want to introduce with this sort of thought. This is a lot like calling a play, an offensive play in football. You call a play, you know what the play wants to do. At the professional level, they usually have several options built into the play. So the first point is, to succeed, one must first fail. There's this idea that every play that is called in football does not score a touchdown. In fact, most of them don't. But yet it's all about learning from one play to another to try to improve, and then eventually being in the right place at the right time to score a touchdown. So the thrust of this is, although sometimes companies are faced with we're all in on this decision. If this decision doesn't go the way we think it's going to go, the idea doesn't work, we're out of business because we were out of money and we're just going to have to close up shop. There are those out there. But what it's really talking about is try to experiment where your company is not on the line, where you're not all in on any particular decision. Find out what works, double down on that, find out what doesn't work, and don't do that again. And the next one is, I really like this, that entrepreneurship requires considerable thought and planning, but is in essence unplannable. And again, my football metaphor is perfect. An offense goes in with an offensive game plan. And guess what? The defense does something completely unpredictable. And so the best way they sum this up is with this cliche, or this term, that you want to have bent knees. And think about that from an athletic standpoint. If you look at players that are playing defense, whether it's in the field on baseball or in basketball or in football, when you see players standing up with their knees locked, that says they're not really ready to react quickly. They have to be in that little bit of a crouch, that little bit of a bent knee to be able to respond to whatever comes their way. And I love that idea that entrepreneurship is the same way. Have a plan, but be ready to respond, because chances are overwhelming that you're going to need to respond. And that's where you get, again, that paradox of, even though you want to be creative and you want to be adaptable and reactive, you've got to have rigor about your company. Because if everything is loosey-goosey, you'll see opportunities but not be able to act on them successfully. And then that last bullet, yes, this is the seizing part, a bias for action, but sometimes you have to recognize that it's not time yet. The top bullet on this slide is the inverse of the bullet I talked about, the next to last bullet. And that is, if you are too tight in your processes. If you are too controlling, then you're going to miss opportunities. So part of entrepreneurship is this balance of loosey-goosey versus having rigor in your processes and getting that balance right so that you are ready to adapt to the world. Staying too close to your customer is the seed of your own destruction, and that is simply because your customers don't always know what they really want next. And it's that company who's out innovating that thing that they really want next, but nobody knows it, that can pull the rug right out from underneath you. And lastly, creating long-term value may require that you resist short-term profitability. I remember when Mark Zuckerberg was offered $500 million and then almost $1 billion for Facebook. And I thought he was nuts for not selling it. Well, he's certainly proven me wrong, hasn't he? So going back, these are not real prominent in the textbook, but these are three things that they're going to organize around. That entrepreneurship is opportunity driven. Even an A team with a C idea cannot generate top quality results. So the opportunity has to be there. Then you have to have the right people driving the bus. We'll talk about lead entrepreneurs, but we're also going to talk a lot about teams and not make a great distinction between the two. So we'll just call it the entrepreneurial team, whether it's one person or many people. You have to have the right people driving the train. And then you have to have this, the word is resource parsimony, and they have to be creative. And what that says is you can't be spendthrifts with your resources. You have to be very frugal with what's going on. And to that end, I want to introduce you very briefly to a couple of key concepts. Bootstrapping. This is where you find the cheapest way possible to do things. This is where you lease instead of buy. This is where you borrow instead of own. This is where you buy used instead of new. So all of these things you can do to keep costs down. That's what you'll hear the term bootstrapping. You'll hear the term burn rate. This is how quickly you are burning through your cash. Burn rate's usually cited as a monthly statistic. Cash flow positive. That means from a cash flow perspective that you're bringing in more money than you are spending, usually on a periodic basis, usually for a month. And you'll hear business talk about, oh, I'm cash flow positive, or we will be cash flow positive in X number of months. So these are some key resource terms that you're going to start reading about right from the get-go in the book, and I wanted you to be familiar with them. In the next video, I'm going to augment what the book talks about with the individual as the entrepreneur. Join me for that.